All right, today we're going to dive into a really delightful riddle. It sounds pretty simple on the surface, but trust me, it really forces you to think about wisdom, awareness, and what it even means to be a fool in the first place.
So, here it is, the big question. Is the fool's fool, the person who knows all about the fool's mistakes, themselves a fool? It's a fantastic little brain twister, isn't it? It kind of pits what you can see against what you actually do.
Okay, so before we can even try to answer this, we've got to make sure we're all on the same page. Let's start by breaking down who we're actually talking about in this puzzle. First up, our main character, the fool. For our purposes here, let's just say a fool is anyone who consistently acts unwisely or, well, just lacks good judgment. You know the type.
And follies? What are those? Well, these are just the specific mistakes, right? The foolish actions and behaviors that get the fool their title in the first place. Think of them as the evidence of the crime of foolishness.
Now, to make this a little easier to wrap our heads around, let's give our characters some labels. We'll call the original fool, Fool A, and the second character, the fool's fool, we'll call Fool B. So just to be clear, Fool B is the one who sees and knows all about Fool A's mistakes. This whole setup is going to make this much easier to pick apart.
All right, now that we know who's who and what's what, let's jump into the first argument, the idea that, yeah, the answer is just a simple yes.
And this is really the core of that first argument. Just because you can see foolishness in somebody else, that doesn't automatically make you wise. Recognizing a mistake is a whole different ballgame from being immune to making one yourself.
Here's a great way to think about it. Imagine you see someone trip over the same loose step on the sidewalk every single day. You might think to yourself, wow, what a fool. But then, the very next moment, you're not paying attention and bam, you trip over that exact same step. Well, all that awareness of their folly didn't really save you, did it?
So what this all boils down to is that Fool B, our fool's fool, might be an absolute expert on all of Fool A's mistakes. But that doesn't mean they don't have their own, completely different set of follies. And, let's be honest, the name itself, Fool's Fool, kind of gives the game away, doesn't it? It suggests they haven't quite escaped the label themselves.
So if we follow this line of thinking, the initial verdict seems pretty straightforward. Yes, the fool's fool is still a fool. Knowing about somebody else's mistakes is not a get-out-of-jail-free card for your own.
But wait a minute, is it really that simple? Let's challenge that first verdict. Let's ask if maybe, just maybe, there's a little more nuance here than a simple yes or no.
And this is the question that really cracks the whole thing open. What if being a fool isn't an on or off switch? You're either a fool or you're not. What if it's actually a spectrum, a scale with different degrees of foolishness?
We can think about it like a ladder of wisdom. At the very bottom, step 1, you've got total ignorance. That's our Fool A, completely unaware of their own mistakes. But look at step 2, perceptive folly. That's Fool B. They're aware of other people's follies. Now, they might not be at self-awareness or true wisdom yet, but they're definitely on a higher step. They've started the climb.
The very fact that Fool B can see Fool A's mistakes, well, that shows something, right? It's a spark of intelligence, or at the very least, it shows the potential for growth. And that's a huge advantage they have over Fool A, who might just be completely stuck, blissfully ignorant.
And when you put them side by side like this, the difference is pretty stark. You've got Fool A over here, totally stuck in blissful ignorance of their own mistakes. But Fool B? Well, Fool B has at least one eye open. They can spot unwise behavior. That ability to observe makes them fundamentally different and, you could argue, less of a fool.
Okay, so we've got two pretty good arguments, but they totally conflict with each other. One says yes, definitely a fool. The other says, well, it's complicated. So what do we do? Let's try to bring them both together and see if we can find an answer that feels complete.
And this is where we land. The most satisfying answer isn't a simple yes or no. The fool's fool is in fact still a fool. But, and this is the big but, they are a more perceptive fool, a more aware fool, and because of that, maybe a less foolish fool.
I love this metaphor because it just nails the difference. Imagine foolishness is this giant pit. Fool A is way down at the bottom, and they might not even realize they're in a hole. Fool B, on the other hand, has managed to climb up a bit. They're peeking over the edge, aware of the pit, even if they haven't climbed all the way out just yet. So let's just recap and put all the pieces together. First, the Fool label sticks around because, let's face it, Fool B probably has their own unaddressed mistakes and blind spots. However, their ability to recognize folly in someone else puts them on a totally higher level of awareness. And that leads us to the most important takeaway of all. Foolishness isn't a yes or no question. It's a matter of degree.
And that, of course, leaves us with one final thought to chew on. This whole riddle isn't really about some abstract characters, is it? It forces us to turn the lens back on ourselves. It's really easy to be Fool B, pointing out the mistakes everyone else is making. The real challenge is making sure we aren't being Fool A in our own lives. So what follies do you see out there in the world that you might just be blind to in yourself? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me.